Okay. Hey everyone, it's MP here. We are going to discuss Season 5, Episode 6, Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken. With me as always is the lovely Claire. Go ahead, Claire.
Hello, hi everyone. I'm back for my weekly installment of pain. I keep coming back every week, so I must enjoy it. Just to remind everybody that, again, that this review will be filled with spoilers, maybe some predictions, speculations, and this will be based on knowledge of the book, so please proceed with caution. Okay, so we're on episode 6, and well, this week we didn't have the wall, we didn't have Stannis's march south from the wall, and we didn't have any Dany. So we're going to look at Arya in Braavos, Tyrion and Jorah's adventures. We're going to pop into King's Landing. Dawn, unfortunately, we have to talk about, and then we're going to wrap up with Winterfell. So we always start with thinking about the themes and the title. For me, I would say I'm going to reserve my explanation about the title and what the title means to me towards the end of our discussion, and hopefully that will make sense. For the theme, for me this week, I think it was about telling lies, particularly telling lies to survive in the situation that you're in. So there's a number of examples straight from the dialogue of people referring to lies, lying, or liars. So you've got in Braavos, we call her the waif from the books, but I think in the show she's just called the girl or the little girl.
I haven't noticed any credit roll or anything. I haven't paid attention.
I'm not sure what she's called in the show, but she's the waif, who's the other novice at the House of Black and White. And at the beginning she says, was that true or a lie? And then at the trial, Marjorie, when she's asked about the innocence of Loras, stands up and says it's all lies. Loras, when Oliver at the trial is going through the list of accusations as part of his testimony, and Loras jumps up and says, liar, he's a liar. And then right at the very end, we have that scene with Ramsay and Theon and Sansa, where Ramsay asked, Sansa says, Tyrion never touched me, and Ramsay says, you're not lying, are you? So there's quite a few references in the dialogue to lies and lying. And we've also got, obviously, Littlefinger lying to Cersei, Arya lying to the little girl in the House of Black and White, Arya kind of bending the truth when she's talking to Jack and Hagar, or the kindly man, and Tyrion lies about Jorah unhorsing Jaime to the slave traders. So there's loads of lying to kind of deal with the situation that you're in, and for some people there's a payoff to it. So Tyrion lies and he ends up again saving his own skin.
You didn't lie.
It does
Jorah's skin, by the way.
Pardon?
He lied to save Jorah's skin.
That's true, yeah.
Lying.
But it didn't work for Marjorie, and it didn't work for Loras. So for some people, the lies worked and they didn't work. So that was my opinion of the theme this week. What did you think? You had something slightly different, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm not going to go into mine in as much detail as you just did. I'm just going to lay them out for you as we move along. But the themes are patience. Patience is a virtue, and the act of becoming someone else, which I do believe was one of my themes that I mentioned last season in the Small Council. And by the way, and I keep forgetting to do this, links for the Small Council will be in the description below, and anybody else as well that we might stumble across, mention. But yeah, what were your links on the Meister's chain, as you like to go by?
I'm going to award, yet again, I'm going to be really boring, but another 3 links. I just can't. I struggle with this. I'd like to be able to go to 4, but I just the whole Dawn situation just pulls it right back down to just average for me. I just it's a real shame. We'll get to that when we get to it, but that's why it makes it 3 links for me.
And of course, I always go to 1 for entertainment value and 1 for what lies beneath the surface of the episode. For entertainment value, again, and I agree with you completely, it is only a 3. Dorn just ruins it all again. Very sad. It's also weird too that we get the ending of a fight scene with Jorah, and we just get a shot of him getting thrown to the ground after probably at least some bit of battle, or at least an attempt at it. Obviously he was unsuccessful, but and we get the sand snake battle that's just preposterous, and like, what the fuck is it? It's just but so yeah, 3 for entertainment. But for meat, I think I'm actually going to go with a 5 for this episode.
Ooh, right, okay.
I think there is reference to at least 3, but possibly 4. I'm not even sure if they're popular theories, but 4 theories in general that I think are at least hinted at or touched upon, which that's what I love trying to pull out of the show. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, 5 for what you grabbed from it, but 3 entertainment value. It was slightly above par just because it's Game of Thrones. Okay,
all right. So let's go to Braavos. So we go back to Arya in the House of Black and White, and she's talking. She's basically, it opens up with her kind of tending to the dead, and to me she seems really attentive and thoughtful when she's doing that, and I just think it just makes me think, well, you know, Arya Stark respects death. Arya and Death are quite close friends at this stage, and you can kind of see that, I think, through how she tends to the dead. So there's something kind of respectful, and there's a close relationship there that I think Arya has with Death in general. And then we meet the waif, and she has a conversation with the waif. What did you think about that?
I loved it. I love the what do they call it in this episode? The game of faces?
Yeah, the game of faces.
In the books, it's the lying game, I think, is how Arya refers to it. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the game of faces. That's because I just looked up, or I never would have remembered, but had a hunch that what was said in that was probably directly from the books. And essentially, it is like the waif's lie or story she tells Arya is from the books. It's a little bit more detailed, but I enjoyed the whole entire scene. We'll just break it down here. For the patience theme, we have Arya throwing a tantrum, saying, "I'm not scrubbing one more corpse until you tell me why you are doing it." And the waif says, "You will know why when it's time, not before." I think that's also a sort of hint about the whole entire story, but it's this actual, you will know why when it's time, not before. Be patient, just wait. Things will be revealed to you as we go along. And I think from the books, there's a lot of other mentionings in the 2 chapters that I read that relate to these scenes. A lot of be patient, wait, just don't. One of the quotes is, "Before you can learn to move, you must learn to be still." That's actually Arya remembering lessons from Syrio back when he was teaching her. Another one, this isn't about patience, but it's just something I want to throw in here. "You may hear things, but you must let them pass in one ear and out the other. Do not listen." I love that line. That's George, just having fun with this. Be careful.
I mean, in the book, when the
one more quote here, Claire, and then I'll let you say what you're about to say. And then another one. Then you can learn to see a lie, ... And once you do, no secret will be safe from you. And I do believe George is teaching us how to do that within the context of the books, at least his lies that he's thrown into the books. What were you about to say? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say in the books that when she tells Arya that story, you know, and Arya has to guess whether she's telling the truth or not because it's the lying game. And the Waif says part of it is a lie, part of it is an exaggeration.
Yeah, there is an untruth and an exaggeration, I believe.
And but some of it was true. Yeah, and Arya has to figure out which bit is exaggerated, which bit is true and not true. So it does come from the books. But yeah, again, for me, it was the bit about the lying game and which bit is true and which bit is a lie. But yeah, I think you can absolutely apply that to throughout the text in the books. There are messages, I think, littered from George about how to proceed with interpreting everything that's going on. And you just get little nuggets of that from time to time.
To just break down my, sorry I interrupted, but Claire has given me permission to interrupt her. She has told me of her own volition, interrupt me, stop me whenever you feel like it. So I'm just going to break down mine, and then we'll go into what you have to say. Arya then proceeds to go, when do I get to play the game of faces? And the Waif says, you tried already, you failed. And Arya says, I didn't even know I was playing, and asks her, who are you? What are you doing here? And how did you get here? So the Waif tells the story, and it's about being born from a Westeros to a the only child of a noble house from Westeros, that her mother died, her father remarried, and that the mother was jealous and wanted her daughter as heir. And then she attempted to poison the Waif, and the Waif found out and came to the Faceless Men, and that's the story that she tells. And then she says, was that true or a lie? And great artist, and she, what? Which I thought was great. And did you believe every word I said? And then Arya, later on, we have giving mercy to the girl. These two stories gonna play into each other with what I have to go with here. And Jaqen's watching, and Arya tells the story about being sick and dying, and that her father never ever gave up on her. And this is of course a lie, because we know Arya is never sick or dying. But then he brought her there, and she drank from the fountain, and it healed her. So Arya is now doing another version of the lying game to this little girl, but for the sake of giving her mercy. But you take these two stories and you put them together, and what they're giving us is an example of Catelyn Stark, and how she treats Jon. We know that she's jealous of Jon, and she wants Robb to inherit the throne to Winterfell. Of course, Robb technically by rights is the heir. And sometimes I just read what's in front of me. At an H. From the show, we actually have, which isn't from the books, this monologue of Catelyn in season 3, episode 2, of Jon having caught the pox.
Yes.
Sick. And so
he's talking to Brienne.
No, Talisa.
Oh right, okay.
Too, but then I remembered as I was going for it. And in that monologue, she lays down a whole shitload of stuff. When my husband brought that baby home from the war, I couldn't bear to look at him. I didn't want to see those brown stranger's eyes staring up at me. So I prayed to the gods to take him away, make him die. He got the pox. I knew I was the worst woman who ever lived, a murderer. I condemned this poor innocent child to a horrible death. That's puzzling statements. And I never would have read into it in season 3 when I saw that as much as I am now. But does Catelyn really think that praying to the gods for Jon to die, that's why Jon got sick with the pox? Is it possible that there was some sort of Catelyn motive? And no, I'm not saying this at all, that Catelyn poisoned Jon. Obviously, this is strictly show only, but we do have the fact of them including this version of the Lion Game into this episode, and you put those two stories together, the one Arya tells and the Waif's one, and that's this whole scenario with Jon. Now, whether or not she poisoned him or he actually got the pox, we don't know, but it's that whole Catelyn Tully scenario that's being sort of being jealous of the child,
being scared that Jon would be the heir.
Yes, well, we know that Catelyn's always been pissed off about Jon. Not that a bastard has any rights to the throne. So why is she so nervous about him? That's always a question that sticks with me. Why does Catelyn care so much about Jon? Why is she afraid of him if he's just a bastard? And the last thing I will have to mention, just because I have to, the father in the Waif story was married prior to the second wife. I'm just saying that, throwing that in there. And then we get to, so that's the bulk of my Arya scenes there, but we do have the Hall of Faces, I'm just going to call it. What did you think about that?
Well,
or go back and tell me anything you want about
yeah, Skippy Skip. You've missed Jack and Hagar, and him giving her a few smacks now and again when she's twisting the truth a little bit, you know, and she says to him, "I'm not playing this stupid game anymore," and he says, "You'll never stop playing." And to me, that's I'm not going to be a faceless man, and him saying that you've got to be everything. It's got to be all or nothing. So that's what I pulled from that. And obviously, as you said, she lies to the little girl. I just think, for me, when they get to the room of faces, whatever it's called, that's kind of down deep in the basement, underneath the House of Black and White. I mean, it looked fantastic in the show. It kind of was very different to how I imagined it from the books. For some reason, I can kind of remember the faces sort of hanging off the wall on little leather straps, and they're quite sort of bloody and gory. Unless I'm just
that's sort of the image I have stuck in my head about I didn't have the image of them stuck in these blocks. I sort of just like rows and rows of just sort of leathery things hanging there.
Yeah. So Jaqen says, he asks her, you know, is she ready to be no one? And she just seems fascinated by one of the faces. So she's distracted. She's not even listening to what he's saying. So he says, you know, quite clearly, you're not ready to be no one, but you can become somebody else. So I think we're going to be moving into Arya's kind of first assignment and testing out her skills and what she's learned. I mean, in the books, there's a lot more to this. It's about they take away part of like her senses, so she becomes blind for a while. And there's a lot more.
Get that later on. I don't think she's even gonna wear a face, right? Do you think they're gonna throw her into a new body right away? Or I was just assuming she was gonna go work with Brusco.
I think they're going to cut all of that and get straight to her first assignment is likely to, you know, who do we know that's arriving in Braavos? Oh,
I suppose you're right.
Mace Tyrrell and Meryn Trant, and we've got like 4 episodes left. So
you're right. There's not enough time to even throw her in there with Brusco. That sucks. Because I thought when we saw her in, I don't know, episode 1 or 2, arriving at Bravos, when we see her sailing through it and you see her smiling for once and looking at all the action around the canals, I was like, oh, it's going to be so great to see her interact with these people. But I'm a little disappointed. But you make
I don't know, we might do. I think I saw a still shot from on the set where it looks like Arya's kind of wheeling a barrel of, I don't know, you can imagine like seafood or...
Maybe they combine the two, and instead of her going mercy on us, maybe they give us her working for Briscoe and she kills Trent that way.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be for them to do the Mercy chapter, it would be like an entire most of an episode, because you've got the play and it's all the kind of multi-dimensional.
Such a fucking good episode, though.
Yeah, it would be.
That, and I would just like 10 hours wait one watching, pause, rewatch, pause.
Just to say, if anyone wants more information on the Mercy chapter, myself and MP and Tony Teflon did a review of the chapter, the early release chapter of Mercy, and we did that on Tony's channel on Teflon TV.
And side note on that, and I do have to just mention it, and once again I read it and pointed out, there's a part in that video where I believe we all say that sword up her, or the blade up her sleeve is Needle. It's definitely not Needle.
Yes.
Whiffed on that big time.
Yeah. Okay, have we finished with Arya and Bravos? Can we move on?
Well, sure. Again, so there's the patience theme with Jaqen saying she's not ready to become no one, but she is ready to become someone else. And that's the two themes right there. Patience, you're not ready to become no one yet, but you are ready to become someone else. That's becoming someone else is going to play through with a lot of the other characters. The Hall of Faces, I thought, and you corrected me because you said it was just someone's grandmother or something, a cast of a face, but I thought it was a face that looked eerily like Septa Mordain. Is that their Septa from Winterfell?
Yes, Septa Mordain, yeah, from the show.
That's who I thought the face was the actress who played her in the season 1, but I guess not. You said it was somebody else?
Yeah, I think it was the mother of one of the producers or directors, or yeah, I heard somewhere. So yeah.
Were you looking for any strange faces?
Pardon?
Were you looking for any strange faces?
Oh, I'm always looking for strange faces.
No, they had the George Bush one in season 1 or 2.
On the spike, yeah. That was brilliant. Okay, let's move on.
Rush through.
Let's move on to Tyrion and Jorah. So we see them again, kind of on the wandering, and they're bonding over the loss of their fathers in a strange way. So, you know, it's quite touching, really. And Jorah seems genuinely moved by the news about his father's death. Tyrion's obviously not so sad about the death of Tywin, and he confesses to Jorah that he murdered his father. But then again, that makes me think, is he lying about having no regrets? And we know that in the books he's a much darker Tyrion.
Tortured.
Yeah, he's quite suicidal at this point. But there's a bit of bonding there going on, and then they bump into the slavers. And that you know, Tyrion lies again and manages to talk himself and Jorah out of being killed or shipped off by the slavers. I mean, who knows where they're going to go, but certainly he saves his life. Prior to that, he's having a bit of a dig at Jorah about, you know, just because she's the rightful heir, it doesn't necessarily mean she's going to make a good queen. You know, what does she know about Westeros? Which I thought, well, that's quite a good point. Oh, sorry, that's my phone going. Yeah, so what do you think about those scenes there with Tyrion and Jorah?
The first one we have when Tyrion tells Jorah about Gior's death, and I'm just going to quote him essentially. And Tyrion explains that he was leading an expedition beyond the wall and that he was murdered by his own men. This is obviously a little bit of foreshadowing for a future expedition beyond the wall and a mutiny that happens there.
Good point. Yeah.
I did ponder a lot about the magic dwarf cock. I see you smiling there. It's the mention of it, and it's got to be a loaded statement, which is you can't just hand a dried cock to a merchant and expect him to pay for it. He has to know it came from a dwarf, and how could he know unless he sees the dwarf? It will be a dwarf-sized cock, and then an emphatic guess again from Tyrion, which is funny in itself. But to me, it goes to show a bit of Tyrion himself in his outlook up until probably about this point is he has to see something to believe it. Now he's heard Jorah tell him about the birth of the dragons, so I'm assuming that he's believing that Jorah is telling him the truth, but I'm not entirely certain that he does believe in the dragons yet. Maybe just thinks Jorah is crazy. No, that can't be right.
Well, he's seen one.
Oh, of course. Yeah, thank you. That makes much more sense. Now, yes.
I think that's one of the things that's just fueling Tyrion forward at the moment is curiosity about this new world and these stories that he's read about just coming alive in front of his eyes, and him wanting to, he's curious about what Daenerys is really like. Otherwise, I don't think he would, he would be quite happy to just drink himself to death. He's a bit kind of lost at the moment, but this purpose of driving him forward is, I think, is just his own curious mind. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens to them. So they've now been captured by slavers. So, it looks like they're going to be fast tracked to the fighting pits. And we'll see what happens there. Possibly even in the next episode.
Yeah, I can see it happening that quickly. I can see them. Yeah. I'm a little disappointed that we're not getting any Penny either, though.
Yeah, but again, we might do a bit further on down the line, but there's a lot to cram in now into the last 4 episodes. So, something's got to give. Yeah.
The only final thing I have is when Jorah says, "Put a sword in my hand and I will prove my worth." I feel like he's talking more about Dany than to the pirates and stuff. He wants to prove his worth again to Dany rather than prove himself in the pits.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's an expiry date now on Jorah, isn't there? So
well, that's sort of I have a note there, like, what is this foreshadowing? What does Jorah have this interesting amalgamate sort of moment that we're going to be able to pick apart?
I've still got a feeling that they're going to run into that Red Priestess that they saw in.
She's got to come back someplace, right?
She's quite. I've seen her in other things, and she's really good. And I think fairly popular actress, and it's just there was just something there when she gave him that look, and I thought maybe she's going to replace Makoro, or they'll bump into somebody else maybe in another episode before they get to Marine. How she would interact with the slavers, I'm not sure, unless they do the whole slavers market thing, which was that was an interesting part of the books. But again, I don't know if they've got enough time to cover all of this. But we'll see. They're obviously on their way now with the slavers.
Yeah, they would have to bang out certain aspects, one episode, and then, well, I think Danny's taken off on Drogo at the end, like episode 10.
Mm.
I think that's how this season's going to end. I don't think it's going to be John. I think it's going to be Danny at the end.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
So
sure.
they do have 4 episodes. I suppose they could throw in a fair bit of stuff.
I'm sure there's some pattern with the last scenes in each of the seasons. So it's like it either ends with Danny or it ends with. There's a kind of alternating pattern between how they end, similar to the epilogues in the books, you know, between Old Town or Beyond the Wall. I don't know. I'll look into that and come back to you on it. But I'm sure there's a pattern, so we can maybe predict what could. We might be able to predict what the last scene could be. We'll see. I'll get on it. Okay. Anything else that we want to say before we move to King's Landing? Let's go to King's Landing then. So we've got a few scenes here. We've got Littlefinger turning up in King's Landing, and he runs right into Lancel. This seems quite strange to me, this interaction, because
I agree.
Considering how aggressive they've been with just generally the kind of debauchery, people, but just people generally in the capital, you would think that the biggest, as Lancel said, flesh peddler would be right on the top of the list, but he seems to be able to. I mean, yeah, he's a tricky customer, Littlefinger. He's going to be able to talk his way out of things, but it just seemed like as soon as Littlefinger mentioned the Queen Mother, Lancel sort of backed off a little bit, as though he's still quite scared of Cersei and what Cersei might be able to do. Or is Lancel saving some kind of trick up his sleeve for Cersei later date?
There was a look that Lancel gives Littlefinger that makes me think there's got to be some sort of confrontation happening. Like it was a 4 or 5 second look of just Lancel when Littlefinger's done the conversation, just sort of staring at him as he's walking away, I believe. Yeah. And that to me just means that there's some other conflict going to happen, at least between those two, or the church and Littlefinger, which kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's still Littlefinger's motivations seem much grander and more kind of blatantly obvious in the TV show than they are in the books, and he just seems to be making
for the viewer / reader, not to people like Cersei and stuff like that. You're talking about us watching, like we know what Littlefinger's up to.
Yeah, but he's taking. I mean, we know that he said in previous episodes that he if he was a gambling man kind of thing, and that he takes risks, but he's taking some massive risks here between Cersei and Roose Bolton, playing one off against the other. I mean, it's like the stakes are really high.
Again, to go with the patience theme, he counsels Cersei to have patience and not do something. And at the same point, he's saying, but we have to act swiftly. This is something probably only Littlefinger can do, is be patient, but let's fucking move on this now.
Mm.
But what he's done is he's gotten her okay to bring his army north. And he's expecting a depleted army. They're just going to slaughter each other, and he's just going to come in there and pick up the pieces, which, of course, I don't think is going to be the case.
It was a really interesting scene, I thought, thinking about it now. I mean, I haven't really got many notes on it, but just thinking back on it now, he manipulated her really quite easily, and although she was doing her usual like Cersei seething when she was talking about the Boltons, her tone of voice was quite low, and she quite speedily got to the conclusion of, yes, the king will sign the decree. So Littlefinger went in there pretty much threatened her with, you know, that quote, "with choice of one's companions is a curious thing," and that shut her up straight away. And then he's kind of, you know, the massive carrot, dangling the carrot in front of the donkey is the Knights of the Vale for the title of Warden of the North. So he basically went in and very swiftly and deftly negotiated exactly what he wanted out of that exchange with Cersei.
Now, do you think that, sorry to interrupt, you think that he was aware that Jaime's gone and Kevin's, that she's going to refuse those two and put himself in there?
I think he knew that she was on her own and she didn't have anybody else directly there to support her. I mean, there's Cersei at the moment has got Qyburn, and nobody still is really quite sure of what his intentions are, what his motivations are. So yeah, she's really got nobody at the moment, and she's making extremely poor choices, and she's left herself in a position where she's fairly vulnerable in the Game of Thrones, and in terms of being politically savvy. And somebody like Littlefinger will go in and just wipe the floor with her, and she won't even know what's happened. So yeah. I thought that was quite an interesting scene. And then you get, I mean, obviously the lie theme there for me again, with Littlefinger lying about finding Sansa at Winterfell, and the obvious kind of betrayal of Roose Bolton with Cersei. That was included in that conversation. Then we get Olenna arriving back again.
Okay, stop 1 second and talk about Cersei and Bolton. That's another move that Littlefinger made, where he labels Bolton her enemy, so he stopped any communication she's going to have with him. So Cersei is not going to ask him, "How come you have Sansa and you haven't told me?" He's already, this guy is your enemy. So it's a big risk. She could still send a Raven over there and see what Roose says, but
well, she's certainly not going to be diplomatic about it, and I'm fairly certain that Littlefinger would have anticipated that. And he knows that she's just going to be knee-jerk and want the troops to, you know, go up and tackle the traitor Roose Bolton and put Sansa's head on a spike.
Before you move on to Olenna and stuff, a few things I want to say just about the Lancel and the Cersei scenes. Lancel, again, I don't know if we got to it in the last episode, if I mentioned it or not, but he mentions how they smashed the false idols and sent the godless on the run. The one thing I want to note there is that you see that in a scene last episode, and the flaming heart of R'hllor is still standing. You see all the other idols get smashed, but that one still remains standing, which I do believe was intentional. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know.
Yeah.
And a question that I have is, he brought it up because he says, "You tasked me with finding Arya, and I failed you in that." Why do you think, due to, obviously we kind of know why for show reasons, but do you have any speculation as to possible motive that we could have where Littlefinger wouldn't have turned Arya over? Because he sees her in Harrenhal.
Are we certain that he knows that it's her?
Yeah, there was a look there.
Yeah.
And like a little hint of a smile on his face or something like that.
Maybe he's just...
Obviously, they couldn't do it because Arya needs to have her own thing, but can we throw some thought?
I think Littlefinger strikes me as the kind of person who's got a plan, and a carefully constructed plan. And if somebody doesn't come into that and there isn't any advantage for him in terms of moving up the ladder, and they don't present any gain or advantage to his his complex plan, then
That's what I have here too, is Arya no advantage, Sansa benefit. I have written down in my notes too. So
yeah, he probably wasn't really that bothered because she didn't play into his. Why would he? You know, I would have thought
also the notion that Sansa is far more Catelyn than Arya is.
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was great to see Olenna again, and she kind of comes storming in, and it was it was a funny conversation that she had with Marjorie. You know, and she was saying, leave Cersei to me, and then Cersei and Olenna go. You know, it's kind of like clash of the queen bitches, and they kind of go head to head. And again, there is these kind of threats around withdrawing the supplies to the capital from Highgarden, and they're kind of going at it, and it isn't really resolved. And Olenna kind of walks off in a huff. And then we get to the trial, where the High Septon accuses Loras, and then questions Marjorie about Loras's innocence, and he says, as part of his accusations, that when Marjorie is completely affronted and says, "I'm the queen," well, neither kings nor queens are exempt from the Holy Testament. Now that's clearly a nod towards, you know, be careful what you wish for, Cersei, because you're not exempt. And book readers will know what's going to be coming with that. So moving on from this particular episode in King's Landing, there will be a formal trial with Marjorie and Loras. Now this happens in the books with Marjorie, but Loras is completely out of the picture. He's not even in the capital at this point. But it looks like the show is going to go forward again with another trial, and this time it will be Marjorie and Loras. And there are things that are going to be happening between the Faith and Cersei as well, that, you know, so there may be more people on trial. What do you think about everything that happened there with the trial and what's going down in King's Landing with Cersei?
I didn't think overly much about it, aside from the fact that Loras is, well, he's doing your lying thing, of course, but he is also attempting to be someone that he's not. He's saying that he's straight when he's actually gay, so he's putting himself into another viewpoint, I guess you would say, rather than being who he actually is. So yeah, that goes to the becoming someone else sort of theme that I was going for.
Yeah.
Other than that, no, I didn't have much. I'm waiting to see how it plays out. I'm thinking about, I believe, the trailer, and I do believe I recall Olenna talking to Loras saying, "And no one will ever recognize you." I think it was a quick clip or something like that, and I'm wondering how that's going to play out. Whether he's escaping. I'm sure there's going to be something that you can read into that when the scene actually comes up.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't get the previews here in the UK. After this, when the show's finished, that's it. You don't get a, you know, next week on Game of Thrones.
YouTube it on the Game of Thrones channel, and you can go through those.
No, I can't.
I have mine set up to record. Usually, I try to watch it live because you're usually there watching it via Skype with me, anyways. But I try to set it up to record, and sometimes I get it, and sometimes I don't. But
right. Yeah, I don't know.
I haven't seen next week's yet.
Okay, interesting. Anything else that we want to say before we move on to? Oh God, I wish we didn't have to, but Dawn.
Well, we can blast through Dawn pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm fine with it.
I really haven't got a great deal to say on this that hasn't already been said about the bad fight scene. For me, it was like a really crappy Disney movie. The whole thing, Tristan and Marcella.
Pirates of the Caribbean had better fight scenes.
Yeah, it just seemed like really
super fantastical too. This was just ridiculous.
Just everything, considering the depth and the acting in and just the sense of drama that grips you in every other bloody scene except this one. Is just, and it just felt so, again, so cheesy when they were all gathered, you know, in the shadows, and Ilaria was
the whole with out Unbent, Unbroken scene when they're standing there like, what? Yeah, it was bad.
There were so many things about it that really fucking pissed me off. Like Obara in the books is a big, like, manly butch warrior, and she would
like a smaller version of Brienne,
tear shreds out of a kind of limited, reduced Jamie, and she just seemed like this tiny little doll that was skipping around, and it was like, oh my god, what are you doing in those ridiculous scarves, like in disguise? It was like something from a horrible Disney movie, and it was just horrible. Everything about it, just even with Bronn and Jamie, the way they were creeping round, and just, it was shit, the whole thing. The only thing that I would say about the whole appearance of Dawn is when Bronn and Jamie were arriving, and Bronn was singing The Dornishman's Wife, and Jamie told him to stop, and he said the best bit about the song is the ending, and he was just getting up to the ending. And again, I think that might possibly play into my theory about Bronn being seduced by a Dornish woman / sand snake / Illyria, and that there will be a betrayal of Jamie, and there'll be a splitting of Jamie and Bronn. I mean, I thought it was quite interesting when Doran was talking to Hotar, and he looked down at Marcella and Tristan in the Water Gardens and said, oh, a Lannister and a Martell, we must protect them. And he asked her, you know, do you remember how to use your axe? Mm-hmm. Great, yeah, fine. Mildly interested to find out what's going on with Tristan and Marcella. Not that much, to be honest with you. I think it's just too saccharine. But yeah, the handling of the sand snakes and just that whole storyline is ridiculous, just ridiculous. And I'm just trying to kind of blank it out, to be honest.
Yeah, the condensed Dornish conspiracy is a little bit, it needs a far bigger role than these short scenes just throwing them into battle. The only notes I really have, horrible pretty much all the way around. Of course, Jamie and Bronn are in disguise. They are being somebody else. Yada, 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 goes to the theme. What I do like about it is the fact that Bronn does ask the question of, and once we have the princess, what then? And Jamie's answer is, I like to improvise. To which Bronn says, and that explains the hand. This is actually another thing about patience. This is why Jamie got his hand cut off in the books, is he was rash to act when the Blackfish said, harry him, he's going to come out and chase you guys, and we're going to get him. That's exactly why. And it's a book metaphor for how we're, again, I say this all the time, but how we're supposed to read the books is patience. Don't jump ahead. Don't just reach for and grab something that's not always laid out yet. And of course, the one thing we do get from the fight is Bronn gets the cut. Mm-hmm. Now, are we assuming that they're poisoning their weapons just like Oberyn?
Possibly, yeah.
But how does that play into your? I got.
You know, I was going to say, I can't see. Can you sort your camera out? It's just. Can you move it slightly, or?
I can.
No.
Go ahead and talk about your theory. I'll.
Yeah,
speak. Don't
Well,
poison.
I mean, if it's the type of poison that that's slightly better. If it's the type of poison that Oberyn uses, that Tyene is using with the knives, then it'll be a slow acting poison, so they will know that he's dying, but maybe he won't. You know, or maybe he's easier to manipulate if he's kind of been affected by some kind of slow acting poison. I don't know. I don't even know if they've got time to cover anything like that. I just think the seduction of Oakhart by Ariane in the books needs to be reflected somehow in the TV show, and she's been cut as a character, so I thought maybe they could do this with Bronn, and I think in the blink of an eye he would betray Jaime. He's a sellsword at heart, and he's also, if anything, his loyalties lie with Tyrion, not with Jaime.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we got the cut, we had it focused on, and Bronn even looks at it, I don't think it was just say, oh, she cut me. I think the best thing about the whole Dorne scene to me was Bronn at the very end, when he says you fight good for a girl, and she charges at him, and then they're getting hauled away and he's smiling. That was the only part out of the whole thing I liked, is Bronn just sitting there smiling. Like he's just in heaven. This is where he belongs.
Bit of flirting, maybe. Tyene's the one that he falls for. Who knows?
There you go.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Let's move on from Dawn, because the whole thing just puts me in a bad mood, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to cheerful Winterfell.
Oh, such a happy event. So we have a wedding.
Yay! A wedding and a bedding. Oh my god. Right. Okay. I've got quite a bit to say about this. Do you want me to go?
Yeah, I got the dog clacking his nails here.
Okay. Right. I've basically, before I go into this, I will just preface by saying that probably the reason why my head went to a strange place here is because I was just so shocked. I know that a couple of people who watch the reviews, one in particular that hasn't read the books but obviously doesn't mind being spoiled, and what I can say is this does not happen in the books. So the whole part of Sansa's identity is about being a maiden. So for book readers, this is like an extra shock. And I'll go straight there, and I will say that my interpretation of what happens throughout the scenes in Winterfell, and including that very end scene, is that Sansa is a Stark, and she's in Winterfell. She's home. She's back in the north. It's starting to snow. And I think that there's some mild warging going on there between Sansa and Theon. And I know that James and LaDonna have brought this up about the Stark children and warging in different ways, and how Sansa has a different way of warging because she lost Lady, so she doesn't have a wolf. So she has this. I believe that I agree with James and LaDonna, and personally I believe that Sansa can warg into people's consciousness. So I don't think it's the same level as Bran, where with Bran with Hodor he can affect Hodor's actions. I think with Sansa it's a kind of milder form of kind of occupying somebody's mind for a while. And just to go back to and reference again with Sansa's warging ability, what's called the unkiss, and just to explain this for people who are not book readers, but this was, if we can remember back in the show, where at the Battle of Blackwater, where the Hound visits Sansa in a room during the battle. In the books, something quite similar happens. So he goes and visits her, and he asks her for a song, and he says that he can take her with him, but she refuses to. and then she touches his face and she thinks that there's a tear there, and he leaves his cloak, and then he leaves and he disappears. Later on in the books, Sansa has a dream about the Hound and that memory of what happened in the room. But in the dream, she remembers that the Hound kissed her. But we know as book readers, in reality, that that didn't happen. So we're left to kind of guess whether or not this is an example of when Sansa maybe occupied the Hound's mind and was able to read his thoughts and intentions, which is for her why she can remember a kiss happening. With that in mind, if you think about the dialogue that happened throughout these scenes, so I'm just going to point a couple of things out here. When she talks to Miranda, she says, "I'm Sansa Stark of Winterfell. This is my home. You can't frighten me." To me, that means that she's gaining more confidence because she's home. Maybe there's some extra power there in there always being a Stark in Winterfell, but certainly she was able to kind of shut Miranda down, and you know, she was I mean, maybe it was a front, and maybe she was frightened of her, but she made it very clear that she was Sansa Stark. I think if you think about Theon, when Theon comes to collect her to escort her down to the wedding, and he says, you know, "You've got to take my arm or he'll punish me," and she says, "Why would you think that I care what he does to you?" So again, just bear that in mind, that quote. Why would I care what he does to you? There are really strong connections here between Theon and dogs. So he's treated like a dog. He's living in the kennels. He calls Ramsay master rather than lord. So there's real like dog and master kind of connections there. We also know from a book perspective that it is easier to warg into somebody who's more subservient and won't fight back. So again, maybe
that's my theory.
Yeah.
Do it with a simpler mind.
At the wedding, I've got some observations about the wedding, but we can come back to in a second. Just going into this a bit further about Sansa and Theon and warging. With the bedding, again, we get this is when I think it happens, when Ramsay says to her, "We need to be honest with each other. We need to be honest with each other." And she looks at Theon, and he says, "Take off your clothes." And that's when she looks at Theon. And I think that that's when some kind of transference of consciousness happens at that point. Because when she turns round and she's got her back to him, to Ramsay, to me, she starts to behave like Theon does. Like she's obviously, you know, he says, don't make me ask you twice. And it's almost like she's reacting as though Theon would when he's chastising Theon. And she turns around and she just gets on with it. And I think that then when you go back to Theon goes to walk out, and it's like he then has to shut the door. And that look, just that expression on Theon's face at the end, I think that that's Sansa watching physically what's going on. And even that a very last micro expression on Theon's face, although he's distressed at what he's seeing, there's like a very small element of defiance in his face at the end. And I just think that is, to me, that's Sansa. So my theory is, and I'm fairly certain that LaDonna, because me and LaDonna have got quite similar views on Sansa, and I'm pretty certain that LaDonna is going to bring this up. But I think that mentally, at least, and this is where it comes back to my ideas about the title of this episode. For me, mentally, at least, if not physically, Sansa remains unbowed, unbent, and unbroken. And I would say, just even if that didn't happen, even if that warging experience didn't happen with Theon, I think after this experience, get ready for Dark Sansa. And I think she's going to be gunning for Roose. I think she's going to be wanting to work with whoever's prepared to work with her to bring the Boltons down. And I'm going to be really, really interested to see what's going to happen when Stannis arrives. Anyway, so that's all I wanted to say about what I got from those scenes. And you probably think I'm completely insane, but maybe it's just my way of kind of like, no, I refuse to accept that happened. So this is how I'm going to justify it. Maybe there is an element of that, but I also truly believe that when it comes to warging, we've got to think back that there was a quote from George R.R. Martin where he said, yes, all of the Stark children have the ability to warg. And that has to include Sansa. And there have been so many examples in the past of maybe some mild swapping of consciousness and dreaming. And yeah, so that's all I wanted to say about it. What do you think?
I absolutely like it. Of course, we've talked about this previously. And when you mentioned it to me, I thought it was great. And immediately I went to the kennels and the dogs and had that flashback into my memory. Of course, it all makes sense. Just to argue against for a moment, and I think I'm actually more inclined to believe with you, but do you think we'll have to get some sort of acknowledgement then right away that that's actually what happened? And I don't know if you've gone that far or not. Do you think Theon was actually, she swapped places with him and he was in her body? Or did you not go there?
Maybe there was just
I'm going to say, I don't care what he's going to do to you aspect, and I thought that's where you're going to go with that.
Yeah, maybe there was a kind of a swapping of consciousness, and because there seems to be something that happened that was similar that went on with the Hound on that occasion, or maybe she's just resting in his consciousness for a while because she mentally doesn't want to be in that place. But I think it's Sansa. When we see Theon's face, it's Sansa looking back at that scene. And
no, I agree with you. I believe I even pointed out to you that last little bit of stoicness at the very end of Theon, where he sort of lifts his chin up a little bit, and it's almost like. So prior to this, my assumption of Sansa's warging abilities was more of in a mind reading capacity, more like she could see what somebody was thinking on occasion. She could pop into their head. But given this episode and what you are saying now, I'm wondering if you go back to the Unkiss, and especially we're going to do everything here just show only, because the show, just having added this, can do what it wants with it. So this could entirely be possible if they decide it to be. With the Unkiss with the Hound, perhaps she's had this moment of entering his head because she was freaked out and she was trying to figure out what he wants. But maybe when she does that, that person enters into her head as well and sees things from her perspective. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why the Hound leaves. Maybe he realizes how freaked out she is.
Yeah.
Scared, and he's like, I can't do that to her.
Maybe.
So maybe there's some sort of switch that happens. Previous to this, I never would have thought that she was.
I've got no idea if any of this around Sansa's warging ability will ever be explored fully, even in the books. Probably not in the TV show, but I think.
This is my argument here: is if that is the case and it happened in this episode, you would think that there would have to be some acknowledgement the next time we see Sansa and Theon together, where there would at least be some sort of how did you do that?
I think this is what I think we will see. I think the next time we see Sansa and Theon in conversation or interacting with each other, it will be different and I don't think that's just because you've watched me having sex with somebody. I think there will be some.
I have done no such thing.
There will be some different connection there between the two of them. You idiot.
Sorry.
The problem is when we go on to over an hour and it just gets into like really silly random time. What I would say is the big thing that we want to know as book readers and show viewers is this identity of Sansa of being pawn or player. So is she really being used and abused by all these politically influential men? Is she just being passed around to, I mean, you could even see with the interaction that she had with Miranda, it was like, oh, have I taken your man? Oh, so, you know, sorry. Because that happens to me all the time. I get these men just that I have to marry and that I have to have some, because that's who I am. I'm a highborn.
Now that you're talking about that, okay. Try to wrap this up quickly here because you got to feed a dog. Miranda telling, this is why I said there's probably at least 3, maybe 4 theories in here that people have touched on themselves. This goes sort of to Bar De-Porto's Brandon theory, her Shadows video, where we have Miranda telling Sansa about all the women that Ramsay slept with before her, and how bored he was of them and how he would never stay with one for very long and he'd move on to the next one. That's essentially what Brandon has done in the history of A Song of Ice and Fire 2, where Lady Dustin's, was it Lady Dustin? That says that she that gives the whole blood on the sword speech.
Yes.
Brandon loves the blood on the sword. Catelyn herself, possibly Ashara Dane. It goes on and on and on. There's also, to go to that theory as well, when Ramsay's, just before he, I'm going to say rapes Sansa or Theon, whoever, he says the things, you wouldn't lie to me on my wedding night, would you? And he's asking if she was a virgin. This you can play into that, the Shadows theory of if Catelyn Stark had had sex with Brandon beforehand, she wouldn't have been a virgin, and she's lying to Ned on his wedding night.
Yeah, that's no way to start off married life. Yeah,
that's no way to start off married life. So that I believe it's actually a veiled hint at these theories, which to me makes the theories all more valid, and I love seeing it like that. So that's why I'm giving this one a 5 for you know, what you can pull from it. That's all I have to say about that. And again, to the unbowed, unbent, unbroken aspect of your theory, Sansa doesn't bow to them. I guess they married different in the north, but in the south, you kneel to them and they place their cloak over you. Getting into sort of creep territory. She wasn't bent. If she's not in her body, she's not bent over the bed.
Yeah.
And she stays intact. She's unbroken, at least mentally.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Physically, her body will have had everything happen to it, but mentally, she's still stoic. She's seen it happen to herself, but it hasn't actually happened to her.
That's exactly what I'm saying. The only thing I would do to wrap this up, because I'm really aware that the dog needs to be fed, is I would say, in terms of favourite scene, I thought visually, although it was had a horrible kind of macabre undercurrent, was the wedding. The fact that it had started to snow, and that to me was reminiscent of Sansa being homesick when she was at the area with the snow castle, and the scene where she stepped out into the yard at the area and it was snowing.
I thought you were going to go different there. I thought you were going to go with Stannis.
No, and also the visuals of the heart tree. And again, that just made me think, oh, heart tree, Bran. I know we're not going to see Bran this season, but can Bran actually see what's going on here?
Absolutely. That's a very good point. I didn't even think about that, but of course, yeah, I bet you he's watching.
Yeah.
At least show brand it is anyways. I don't know about book brand. Maybe with Jane Poole.
Okay, let's wrap it up.
It took something out of my head. It was right there, and now it's gone.
Sorry.
Do that to me. Why?
While he's thinking, I just want to say thanks for the comments, everybody, and please feel free to leave your comments, questions, suggestions. Let us know what you think of any of the stuff that we're saying, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. Have you remembered what you said? What you were going to say?
No, but I did remember something else. Dora Martell, also a Patience is a Virtue type guy. I was going to speak on him, but I won't now because I don't remember exactly what I was going to say. But we do have a little scene with him. That's just about it. He's a very patient man and goes to the patience theme.
Yeah.
What I was going to say just now, I don't remember. Thanks everybody for watching. Links in the description. And I will see you next week. We will see you next week.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, and yeah, we'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.